there, everyone. Fraud has impacted us globally, so much so that we now have an International Fraud Awareness Week each year. This year, it's taking place between the 12th and 18th of November. In support of the Prevention and Detection Initiative, Southern African Fraud Prevention Service has put together a series of interviews with key industry stakeholders to help us understand the fraud landscape and how it's impacting us and our country. I'm Nazia Karim, the Head of Product Development for Southern African Fraud Prevention Service, or SAFPS, and joining me here today is Kevin Hogan, the Head of Fraud Risk at Investec, to discuss with us the impact of fraud in the banking sector. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Nazia. I appreciate it.
So just a quick background on yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. I've been doing this type of work for about, give or take about 22 years now. I've worked with two of the big banks and I've been with Investec for over a decade now. And I was actually one of the founding members of SAFPS right back in the day when Pat Cunningham started it. So I have a long history with SAFPS as well. Obviously just trying to add as much value as I can. Thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to your contribution in this session. So let's get right into it. Tell us, what's the latest fraud trends impacting the banking sector today?
It's always a very loaded question because people are expecting all these new techniques or moduses. And yes, some of them do crop up every now and then, like in the card world, where we're seeing some very clever things being done. But I think what's important to understand is that the way that the frauds are perpetrated or the techniques that the fraudsters are using to compromise you actually hasn't changed for years and years and years and years and years. It all boils down to basically phishing and bad password habits. I mean, those are the key elements really around why you as a consumer get defrauded. Everyone thinks it's this wizardry that some keyboard genius is doing. And if he decides to hack you, that there's nothing you can do. And that's all James Bond nonsense. The reality is that you have more to do with yourself being compromised than I think most people would like to admit. And I suppose really that's why we're here today, is to really shine a light on that. So it's really about looking at yourself holistically and looking at, well, what habits do I have that potentially could make me an easier target than the man next to me? So let me give you a stupid example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not a password. And the word password is not a password. We've even seen clients who use their cell phone number as their password. So it's these habits that you have that are getting into trouble. I suppose another one, most people on the call are probably using the same username and password for more than one account. So it's these habits that you have that are helping fraudsters steal from you. Same with phishing. Phishing is really being sent an email. The whole point of the specific email is to get you to engage with it. So it can be from Netflix, it can be from your bank. Let's say you're into cycling, it can be from a bicycle shop. It doesn't matter. The whole point of these emails that you get is to get you to engage with the email. Typically, they'll supply links in the email. You click on those links. There's a 69% chance you could download a virus, or it will lead you down a garden path. So maybe it'll get to a PDF document. That document will have a link in it that might get you to a login screen. And really the whole mission or modus of a phishing email is to get you to give away your credentials, your login username and password, or something that they can use to compromise you with. So it's really these habits that are the issue.
I think you're quite right about that, Kevin. I think we need to take accountability and responsibility for how we manage our personal life and our security. Creating a skeleton key for every account in our life is not exactly advisable. And I think that is something personally in our own capacity that we do need to address. And I'm hoping, viewers, that you are not one of the viewers that have your password as password. So let's touch a little bit more. You spoke about it a little bit earlier about technology, but how has the emergence of the new technologies such as the artificial intelligence and deep fakes impacting your fraud world at this point?
So I think what we're seeing is that, you would typically have a fraudster try and create a phishing email from scratch. In the old days, you used to see, Perhaps you've got some guys from West Africa or Southeast Asia. English is not their first language. Now they're trying to craft this email, and you can pick up, the grammar's not great, the spelling's not great. And so in the old days, it used to be quite easy to kind of pick these things up. You fast forward today, they're now using ChatGPT to create phishing emails. So the grammar's amazing. It's really good. In fact, I was with some Afrikaans clients last week, and I said to them, guys, don't get a false sense of security when you get an email that's in Afrikaans. And it's not this broken Afrikaans that sounds like, it's some redneck trying to speak Afrikaans. It's really good. And so, AI is doing it, ChatGPT is doing it. So the fraudsters are using this technology to overcome some of the obstacles that they've had around English not being their first language, maybe Afrikaans not being their first language, and also just to make things look very professional. So it would convince you to engage with the content a lot more. I suppose from a deepfake perspective, I'm not aware of any deepfake being used in the South African context yet, specifically around imaging, so facial recognition, video conferencing recognition, things like that. But I know it is absolutely possible. The thing that did concern us is around what we call synthetic voice, where a lot of us have call centers, and you would have someone call in using your voice, essentially, where they can use a synthetic voice simulation to pretend to be you. I can't speak for the other organizations, but I know for us, we have some synthetic voice detection already because we know it's coming. And I would go out on a limb and say, I'm pretty sure that most of the big banks and other providers who use this type of technology are probably going down that road. So we're having to shift. We're having to spend a little bit more money to get in, for example, a synthetic voice detection. But you're going to end up in a situation where, for example, in the Investec context, we like to meet our clients. We like to see them. And very often we do video calls with them. And I'm pretty sure in the not too distant future, you're going to end up doing a video call with someone who maybe is using a deepfake pretending to be the client. So that's also a bit of a hair-raising thing. And you're going to have the technology in place to detect, hang on a second, this is not the real human being. This is not a living, breathing human being. So, for example, in our facial recognition technology that we use, we do what we call a liveness test. So when you are doing the selfie of yourself, it checks that you're a real, breathing human being. There are some algorithms built in that. So it's not a photograph, it's not a mask, it's not a mannequin, it's not a video of a video. So that technology is already coming down the line, and the banks are having to shift and make these changes to cater for those scenarios.
That's actually great. It's forward thinking that's going to help us prevent this type of technology taking over in a fraud world, impacting our banking. But it's glad to hear that the banking sector is making those changes or preparing for them. So let's discuss quickly the international transacting world. Transactions today, it's become an everyday activity to perform transactions internationally. You buy things online from online stores across the borders, and you pay with your credit card. What precautions can consumers and businesses implement to prevent themselves from falling victims to global syndicates pretending to be these legitimate institutions?
Well, I think, the first thing that comes to mind is an incident we had during COVID where a client of ours was engaging with a PPE supplier in Thailand. And all that engagement was over WhatsApp. There had never been a physical meeting face-to-face. There had never been, I don't know if there were even any actual conversations, over the phone or over video chat. From what we could gauge, everything was done over WhatsApp. And this individual was prepared to part with millions based on these transactions. And the guys are sending them pictures of the warehouses and contracts and all sorts of stuff. So it's this whole ruse, this whole string and story that you get, pulled along with to convince you to part with your hard-earned money. The reality is that, in a business context, really, you should be doing your due diligence. I know a lot of these suppliers are abroad and are overseas. If you're going to be parting with 5, 10, 15, 20 million, get on an aeroplane, go and see that supplier, verify that they are legitimate, verify that they do what they say they do. And most guys don't want to do that because, it's going to cost me 200,000 Rand or 300,000 Rand to go to Thailand to check this out. And a lot of business people don't want to do this. And that's very, very short-sighted. I think in your personal capacities, I think most people are shopping online now. And yes, there are fake sites. We have seen several of them. There are a couple of big retailers here where their sites have been spoofed and fake sites have been created. The fraudsters are ranking their pages above the legitimate sites. We've seen that done in Google searches. So people are conned into thinking they're real. I suppose at its core, the best way to protect yourself is to manage your card information, because typically you're putting in your credit card information. And one of the best ways to do that is to use a virtual card. Most of the banks are now offering this product. So let me give you a typical example of what I do. So I have a virtual card that I've created, and it's called Online Shopping. And that virtual card is literally reserved to only be used to shop online, to input that information. So let's say I'm going on to Takealot and I want to do a 2,000 Rand purchase. So I'll go into my virtual card, and what's really nice is you can manage everything dynamically. So all your limits, should the card be used overseas, you can switch it off for international transactions. You can do all these bespoke things on the card, which is really cool. So what I do then is the limit is currently 0 or 1 Rand on the card. I've put it there by on purpose. I raise the limit to 2,000 Rand on the card. Let's say I'm shopping overseas. I then switch on the functionality to say, allow this purchase overseas. I switch that on, and now I make my purchase. And then it goes through and everything's fine. When I've done with that purchase, because remember, I've now given away my card information, right? Yeah. So we don't know what this merchant is doing with that information. What I then do is I go back into the virtual card. I reduce the limit back to 1 Rand. I then switch off international spend completely, right? And then what I can also do, which is really cool, is I can actually pause the card. So I push and I pause the card, and now the card doesn't work. So even if that card information, was compromised, the card would actually be useless because I'm managing that card proactively. I would even encourage people that when they're traveling overseas to load a virtual card on your Apple, Samsung, Google, Garmin Pay and manage it proactively like that. Card skimming and card scams are rife overseas. We had a staff member who was catching a taxi in France. And I stand to be corrected, but I think the transaction, was 30 euros, something like that. And what he didn't see, he inadvertently didn't see that the taxi driver put in 3,000 euros. And he just paid. And so if you have a virtual card where you can manage those limits proactively and stuff like that, you can then suddenly pause that card. So even though they stole that information, they wouldn't be able to use it to go and spend. One or two of the other banks, full disclosure, have actually created something called dynamic CVV, which means the CVV number linked to that card changes every, and you can set the parameter every 4, 8, 12, 16, 24 hours. So that's an additional security step that even if that card was compromised, because the CVV number has now changed, they couldn't use it. But I suppose a warning to the wise, a lot of merchants don't require CVV. For example, many airlines don't require CVV. Their argument is that they want to remove as much friction in the purchase process as possible so that people don't abandon their purchasing or interaction with the airline. Because obviously, if you have an issue on one airline, you're just going to go to another. So one of the things the airlines, and you will notice this when you buy tickets online, they don't ask you for the CVV, which is really dangerous. So, that's a great way to manage your online risk, especially when you're shopping and stuff like that.
That's quite interesting. I'll have to look into that. I've bought tickets online. I don't remember if I did put in my CV.
International specifically.
Well, I'm currently sitting in Lisbon, so it's quite interesting. Wow. I'm trying to remember if I put my CVV number in.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so in terms of all this international change, it's actually great to hear that the banks are putting in these preventions, are putting in these new solutions that consumers and businesses can take care of. But the government still needs to do something about it. And in this case, the UK is implementing policies that are actually holding the financial sector responsible, especially for authorized push payment type frauds. Do you see this being implemented in South Africa? Is it something that our banking industry would be able to absorb?
Well, I think what is happening is that regulators have realized that we can't keep pace with how quickly the techniques that the fraudsters are using is happening. And what it does is when you experience fraud as a consumer on your account, there's this weakening of trust within the sector. So the financial sector, the banking sector, and I suppose the regulators trying to protect that trust. So if you as a consumer know that even though you may fall victim to fraud, that the loss would be minimized on your end, you're probably more likely to continue to bank, use a specific bank, continue to, keep your money in a bank as opposed to in a mattress. So I think that's the rationale as to why the regulators are doing it. I think as a banker myself, I think it's a little bit unfair because, as we've spoken earlier, a lot of these frauds are predicated by people themselves, their bad habits. People don't want to arm themselves. And it's very short-sighted because a lot of people assume, well, I'm paying a banking fee. It is the bank's responsibility to look after me and protect me. The problem is that our capabilities only extend so far. If you're giving away your card information inadvertently in phishing emails or on fake sites, like you get the Netflix email that says, please update your payment details, and you push the button and you put in your card info, meanwhile it's fake. Why is that our responsibility? Do you know what I'm saying? And very often people get conned into accepting the one-time PIN, providing the 3D secure message. So these are all authorized by the client themselves. And what's happening is that these scams are becoming so sophisticated that the regulator is turning around and saying it's not reasonable for the average man in the street to actually understand that he's being scammed. Because, for example, what we call the courier scam here at Investec is a really, really good scam. This is where you're getting an email or an SMS from a courier company. The syndicates have bought your information from the courier company. So in the email, they're quoting your real tracking number. They then say to you, this outstanding delivery fee or whatever the case may be, please settle the amount. You're convinced that it's true because it's the correct courier company. It's got your tracking number of your real package. And you click on the button and you supply your card information. What you don't realize is happening in the background is that card information is being put onto a cell phone with Apple, Samsung, Google, Garmin Pay. The fraudsters then push a screen to you saying, please enter the payment authorization. Meanwhile, it's the bank's OTP that they're sending you to authorize the card information to be loaded on a phone. People don't read the SMSs. And please read your SMSs. You need to know why you're getting it. And they simply give away the one-time PIN and authorize their card information to be loaded on a phone. Now, the regulator has ruled against the banks on this. Basically, the regulator is saying to us, you will refund. Because this particular scam is so convincing that the average man in the street cannot discern that he's actually being scammed. For example, with email hacking, there is a judgment that was given in Feb of 23, ENS versus Hogan. Same story there. Basically, the judge has said in this judgment that the average man in the street is not au fait with how these scams are perpetrated. And as organizations who know about these things, the onus then is on you to protect your clients. So we're starting to see this shift, both in the legal fraternity and with the regulators, that more and more responsibility is being putting on not just banks, but anyone who deals with finance or with clients. We've seen it done in bicycle shops, estate agents. And so absolutely. In the UK, they're about to pass a law. It was supposed to be passed in February. I believe they've delayed it till October. But basically what that means is if you're a victim of email hacking and you made a payment in good faith, believing that you were paying the correct account, and you end up paying the fraudulent account, basically that law is going to say the bank who made the payment and the bank who received the payment are going to be responsible for refunding that client. So 50%. And they are making it law. It is a regulation. You have to do it. Mm. So I suppose they're forcing the banks to kind of come to the party. I don't know how we're going to prevent these frauds. I feel very sorry for the really big banks, the banks that have millions and millions and millions of clients, because it's really hard to educate millions of people, and the LSM spread is huge. You've got ultra high net worth people, and you've got people that can barely feed themselves. And how do you communicate effectively around fraud awareness to such a diverse demographic of people? It's really hard.
I think that's one of the reasons why we decided to do this video for this particular fraud week. Is we need to be able to create these awarenesses between consumers across different channels. And part of that, SAFPS is implementing solutions like email, which is the scams prevention solution, looking to educate people and create that type of awareness. But I don't think it's enough. I think we need to take it down to a deeper level at education level, where we need to be able to change the behavior. And in today's time, we need to get the modern newbie kids to understand the risk of technology. They're very free with it, but they're not very cognizant of the actual risks that they're associating with. And I think this will help, reduce that kind of fraud. But other than that, how do you perceive that consumers can manage their exposure associated to banking frauds? And what should they try to protect or do to protect themselves today?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. So we've spoken about card usage, and the virtual card is a great way to do that. Your physical plastic should never be given to an individual. You need to be in possession of that card. Use contactless, so tap. Don't hand your card over to anyone. That's important, especially when you're traveling overseas. I would highly recommend that you use contactless exclusively. Card skimming is rife abroad. Many years ago, even someone who is as au fait with this stuff, my card with the bank that I was at the particular time I happened to be on holiday in Paris, and my card was skimmed there. So it can happen to the best of us. So contactless is a technology that allows that not to happen. Then there's cell phone snatching. You need to be careful that if your phone is lost or stolen, the reason they're taking the phones is that your phone is the key to your bank account. And again, this goes back to people's bad habits. How are they getting into the phones? They're getting into your phone because you've only got a 6 and 8 digit password. Okay. And a 6 and 8 digit password is very easy to crack. Let's think about, just for example, a 6-digit password. There are only 99,999 permutations that they need to go through. And you don't even need a quantum computer to do that. So you've got these weak passwords on your phone. And once they're in your phone, maybe 20% of the time they're getting into people's bank accounts. Why? Because people are saving their passwords on their phones. So you're allowing the keychain to save your passwords. And how do I access the keychain on your phone? I use your username and password, your weak username and password. So you're actually creating this problem for yourself. A lot of people think they're clever. They're saving their passwords in their notes. They're saving it in their contacts. Guys, don't save your passwords on your phones. Okay, so you've got to get out of that habit. Please use a password manager. Just go into the App Store, just pick one of the top 5, just pay the fee and just use the password manager. You'll only never ever need to remember one password, and that's for the password manager. So it's about honing people in how do I approach the financial world? How do I interact with that financial world? And how do I interact with technology? So whether it be online. And if people understand what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, the likelihood that you would be a victim of fraud is quite small. And it's silly things. I do a lot of these talks. And for example, most people are using the same email address that they had at university. And you could be 30, 40, 50 years old. Now that email address has been used everywhere. They're using single sign-on. For example, with Gmail, you can log into multiple sites with one particular pass. That's a really bad habit to have. You're just going to get into trouble. So it's really about educating yourself around what is going on there and how do I protect myself. And what I found the key issue here, ultimately, if you had to say to me, Kevin, what's driving this behavior? It's convenience. Most consumers cover convenience far above security. So it's not convenient to have, a 23-character password on a phone. Okay. So if I have a 6-character password, then I can remember it in this easy. But unlike Kevin, who's got a 23-character password, oh my Lord, I'm never going to get into my phone. But they don't realize I'm not putting in that password every single time. I'm using the facial recognition 99% of the time. But then every now and then my phone asks me for the password, but I've got the assurance that should my password be taken, the likelihood of them cracking their password is very low. Okay. So the existing technology can't crack 20, 25, 30 character passwords. And I'm not saying that, get the password manager, use that. So, ultimately it boils down to educate yourself. The banks are providing you with the tools to protect yourself. Use those tools. educate yourself on how to use them. When you're going out, if you're going overseas, use contactless. The one thing I will discourage you from doing is you come across a lot of these websites that require instant EFT. So what is instant EFT? Instant EFT is where you can log on and you're essentially asked to provide your online banking username and password. Essentially, you are giving your login credentials for your banking to a third-party vendor who then logs into your bank account and deducts the money directly themselves. You have no idea what the security standards are for that third-party vendor, and a lot of them do it. Okay. The other issue is that using instant EFT doesn't provide you with the same security or chargeback rights that using a card does. So, for example, if you use your Visa or your MasterCard or your Amex card or whatever it is at a merchant, and that merchant fails to deliver the goods or services, you then have a chargeback right against that merchant. And it's very likely, assuming that that merchant is not fraudulent and they've disappeared with your money, that you would get your money back. So there's a level of insurance that comes with using your card. But if you use instant EFT and that merchant doesn't come to the party, your money is gone. Plus, you've given away your login credentials. So it's really about educating yourself with the do's and the don'ts. Okay.
That's actually quite interesting. And I'm glad that you spoke about that. I have seen many people who have reported instances to us where they have actually used their banking credentials and given away the information. I think I'd also like to add the fact that convenience is a huge problem. I think today's generation, it's all about the laziness and about as much as I can get for as little effort as possible. And for your own security, guys, if you can implement two-factor authentication at minimum on your accounts to prevent that from happening. I know it does seem a little bit laborious, but it is in the end going to protect you. And it is a step closer to preventing the fraud from actually making you a victim.
Correct.
I think today, thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us. We have learned a lot. I have also learned a few things that I'm not aware of.
My pleasure.
And I will certainly implement it on my
you
time.
bank with us, so please take all my advice, okay?
I will, most certainly. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Kevin.
Nazir. I appreciate it.
Enjoy. Bye.
Cheers, bye.